It is the 21st century. There are too many video games. But out there, it's waiting. The best video game you've never played.
Welcome to the best video game you've never played, the podcast where I, stand-up and improv comedian Lewis Dunn, take on the suggestions of my guests to find out what is the best video game that I have never played. I take their suggestion, play it for a week, and then sit down to have a conversation with them, and I either say, your video game is being very attentive in class, he's doing all his homework, and he's coming in, your video game is one of the best video games in my whole class, and I'm delighted to be teaching him. Or I sit down and say, the incident that we recently had with your video game, it really shows me that they don't care to learn, and so I don't know why I should care to teach them. And I think that, honestly, that the best solution for your video game is to just probably put it in a cardboard box and leave it alone. This week's guest is Chris Booker, who is a fantastic stand-up comedian who I've worked with on a few occasions on different gigs around the Northeast. He's a very funny guy. He's a very cheekily impish comic, as we're probably going to learn in this episode, because he has assigned me a video game that, well, look, let's put it this way. There's so many reasons that this video game shouldn't be on this podcast, but one of them is not that you've played it, because I don't think anybody's played this video game apart from me and Chris now. So why don't you sit back and have a listen as we find out what is the best video game I've never played, according to Chris Booker. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you, Lewis. How are you?
I'm very well, Chris. I've been having a very odd week this week with the game that you've given me. And I'll tell you this now. I'm going to admit this right up front. I beat this game 20 minutes ago. Yeah. I have been absolutely up to the wire with the game you've given me this week. So please, can you tell our listeners what game it is you brought along?
I have brought along the 2007 platformer, The Simpsons Game, based on the TV show The Simpsons, obviously. It's a sort of 3D kind of action platformer, bit of collectibles, a sort of semi-open world. It came out in 2007. When I was younger, I bought a PlayStation 3. I bought it off the back of seeing a video game that I assume we're not allowed to talk about because it'll give you an ulcer.
Yes, just for everyone listening, this was by no means Chris's first suggestion of a game to bring on, because what he started with was a ream of video games I already know and love. So we went through about 20 of those before I said, no, you really have to pick something that's like not just what you think the best game is.
That's not entirely true.
You did suggest one game I hadn't played and that I vetoed because I have to play these games in a week, and there is no way I'm going to be able to beat or play enough of Oblivion for you to be able to be satisfied with the conversation we would then have. But I can reassure both you and the listener that I have never liked a single Bethesda game, and I really have tried to play them. So up front, let's get this out of the way right away, Chris, because I know you want to talk about this. The reason I didn't play Oblivion is because I don't want to spend an hour telling you how much I hate Bethesda RPGs. So this is a taste of what you would have got. Instead, you've given me this video game, The Simpsons Game, which, do you know what? I was actually really interested in when it originally came out and just never got around to playing.
Well, it's The Simpsons has quite a long history of video games. They've been going all the way back to like arcade cabinets, and I seem to remember the arcade is quite well loved. Even you mentioned that you quite liked it, but The Simpsons has it's a license that has been used quite a lot by video games, and apart from, I think this might be the Simpsons Game might be the last major sort of multi-platform kind of proper console release of a Simpsons game, because I know they've got like mobile equivalents, but we don't count those.
I can't think of another Simpsons game that came out after the Simpsons Game.
Yeah, and you know, obviously the one that everyone thinks of when they think of a Simpsons game is they think of the PlayStation 2 era Simpsons Hit and Run, which
and
was...
it has to be said, I've been telling people, oh, I'm playing the Simpsons game for the podcast this week, and they go, oh, Hit and Run, and I go, no, the Simpsons game, and they're like, what, like the wrestling one or the skateboard one? And I'm like, no, it is just called this. It's probably the worst title they could have given the game.
Oh, it's awful, especially because, like I said, this was the last of a long line of multi-platform releases. So it's, although I guess in terms of it was ahead of its time on sort of naming its sequel after the original premise. It beat Hitman and God of War and Tomb Raider and things like that. But on the subject of what I wanted to say is, when you said that I suggested a ream of games that you've played, I actually, Oblivion was my first suggestion. And then when you vetoed that, I was sort of floundering, going, well, I have no idea then. And
I didn't want to do The Witcher 3 again.
I
didn't
understand.
want to have to do a podcast which I explained that I don't like high fantasy.
I understand. And then the sort of impish part of me kicked in. And what I realised is the one thing I wanted more than anything in the world is for you to tell me for 1 hour why you hate Oblivion, and by some extension you hate me for being its champion. There was a part of me that thought, because you said that's not a podcast that should be made, and I was thinking that's exactly the kind of podcast I want to make.
Well, look, what you've done is you've set up a wonderful teaser for the potential in the future to do one about Oblivion. But that is not the one we're doing today.
No, and again, I've said this to you in private. Given that there's a chance that I could suggest another game, if it turns out that some guest later down the line suggests Oblivion and you play it, I will never trust a person again. I will feel betrayed, and frankly, I think you will ruin any friendship we have. So really, the ball's kind of in your court there, because if you do it like the week after, I know that you did that on purpose.
Well, the thing that's good, Chris, is that you've successfully given me a very solid reason to never play Oblivion.
So I don't. You get out of jail free card, yeah.
Yeah, I feel fine with that outcome. I'm all right with that.
I mean, this is a slight aside, but you see, one of the things that surprised me is you've played a Dynasty Warriors game.
We're going to be talking about the Simpsons game.
We are, but that's the sort of like last aside that I wanted to ask, because that was one of the first ones I suggested.
I've played some of the Vita Dynasty Warriors game.
Oh, next.
Yeah, for like 2 or 3 hours and found it tedious and boring. And I think I tried to play one on PS3 as well and also did not enjoy it.
Okay. Do you own the Vita one?
I do. I own it through PlayStation Plus, which means that it will, of course, vanish in a few months' time.
Okay. That's, again, a conversation for when we're not recording the podcast. But yeah, the Simpsons game, it's got quite a few elements to it. It's mainly a 3D platformer with like sort of basic combat and platforming. And as I say, I got it when I first got a PS3. I got a PS3 because I saw someone else play Oblivion, and I upgraded on the back of that. And when I bought my PS3, it was from Game. Do you remember Game? When you went to a place.
Do you remember Solid stores? There was a physical place games existed in.
You went in there and they sold games and a slowly increasing number of things that weren't games to keep themselves valid in the 21st century.
Yeah, generally small plastic figurines of things from games.
Yeah, but this was the proper time. This was when Game was only doing games. It was the only place you could really get things like that. And I got a PS3 and it was bundled. It wasn't bundled with Oblivion because Oblivion was slightly too old at the time. It was bundled with Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction, which I enjoy, and you mentioned that you really enjoy as well.
Yes, I love Ratchet and Clank. All the Ratchet and Clank games are fantastic.
They are. They're all great. And it also came with the Simpsons game, and it came with it. And I was interested in Ratchet and Clank, and I knew of it, and I knew that it would kind of be my thing because it made by the same people who made Spyro, and that's a game that I hold very dearly. And so I got the PlayStation back and I played Oblivion mainly, dabbled a bit in Ratchet and Clank, and then I thought, well, I've got this game as well. Let me play it. And it was better than A, it was better than I thought it would be, and B, it was a lot better than it deserved to be.
So yeah, this is one of the strange things about the Simpsons game, is that it's not normally when you get a licensed game, you usually get like a licensed IP or character or world is slapped onto a type of game that already exists. So The Simpsons is incredibly guilty of this. Like,
Yes.
The Simpsons wrestling, The Simpsons skateboarding,
Yeah.
The Simpsons have a go at Crazy Taxi. Like, it's something that happens a lot in the industry because it's like, normally because it's like, well, the idea is that we're just trying to make a product we can sell quickly.
Even Hit and Run. I mean, Hit and Run was just
Hit and Run is
Grand Theft
The
Auto.
Simpsons.
Yeah.
Simpsons GTA. And like, the more you play Hit and Run, the more obvious it becomes that it's like, wow, it's really hard to make a Grand Theft Auto game where you can't give the characters guns. So it's kind of an interesting, like, it's an interesting example of the fact that The Simpsons has had a lot of video games. Like, even, we're talking about like the PS2 era, PS1 era Simpsons games, like they're the start of it. No, The Simpsons goes all the way back to the NES. Like, there's and they're little 2D side-scrollers that aren't brilliant. And there's a Konami-style beat-em-up arcade cabinet game, which I used to play as a kid, and I used to quite like as a kid. And it's a franchise that has been, in a lot of ways, done to death in video games. There's not really any interesting take on The Simpsons left in terms of slapping them onto
kind of
an
prophetic,
thing.
really, isn't it? Like The Simpsons being an IP that's done to death. I mean, that extends far beyond video games, really. It kind of sits in line with, almost like in terms of year by year and the progression, it kind of sits similarly with the TV show, because the TV show was, let's face it, the first series isn't great, and the early sketches just also, they're not great. And fairly recently, because it was required that we sit down and watch TV for hours on end, I started rewatching The Simpsons, and to be honest, the second series, we started from the second series, and the second series is also a bit wonky.
It's a bit wonky, but I think if we're talking about The Simpsons as an IP, I think the second series shows something that The Simpsons has very much lost touch with, is that there's quite a lot of heart and sadness in the second series. Like, one of the episodes is Homer thinks he's going to die and is doing basically a bucket list of things.
Yeah, that's
really quite an emotional episode. And there's definitely stuff about The Simpsons when it starts that is more about the family and the way the family interact with each other and stuff about, like, it's still silly, it's still over the top, but I think there's a real watermark moment in The Simpsons, which is the monorail episode, which is a brilliant episode. It's one of the funniest episodes of the show by far, I think, and it's definitely a highlight. But I think that marks the start of The Simpsons is not really about The Simpsons. The Simpsons is a vehicle for whatever crazy, insane comedic adventure we can invent for them.
That's kind of it, because obviously when you've got a show that's been going on for as long as this one has, I mean, what is it up to, like 30 seasons or some?
Yeah, and there's no plan to stop.
Yeah, it's never going to end. But the thing is, in the early seasons, the people who were writing for it were the people who were there at the conception. So you have people who kind of, I've no idea how Simpsons episodes are written now. I imagine there's some extent of monkeys on typewriters, but
yeah, it'll be a big writer's room of comedians, definitely.
Yeah, but it's the early ones definitely felt like it kind of didn't need essentially a list of rules above a big writer's room saying these are what the characters should stay true to. It's more like the show was staying true to itself just naturally. So it meant that they could play around, they could have more interesting character stories. And that's kind of, I mean, it's again a whole nother podcast talking about where The Simpsons went wrong. But
I think this is a relevant chat to what we're going to discuss now, because the Simpsons game that we've played for this is a Simpsons from 2007.
It is.
It is a post golden age of Simpsons. It's well past series 10.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a writer's room of people who, I think it's fair to say, don't just it's not just that they have to write The Simpsons, it's also that they themselves were fans of The Simpsons before they started writing for it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And there were a few moments when I did think, do you know what? I think I have almost exactly the same thing written down in my notes when I fairly recently picked it up to play again, and we'll circle back around to that. But one of the first things that struck me was how it really does feel like later Simpsons episodes, and in some ways, there were moments, and these were some moments that I really enjoyed. There were moments where I could point to it and say that felt a lot like Futurama.
Oh yeah, well, look, so right, we should probably discuss a little bit of the plot.
Yeah.
Before we
You
go
go
any
first.
further with it. Because look, I always like to accentuate the positives and then go through into some of the criticisms
And
a
then
bit later.
go
So
for the jugular.
here's the thing with the Simpsons Game plot. It is like beyond meta. It is incredibly meta.
Yeah.
Not only about the fact that it's the Simpsons game. One of the first things that happens in this game, I think it is the second thing actually that happens in the entire game, is that Bart picks up the instruction manual to the Simpsons game.
Yeah.
And finds out that he has a series of powers that he can do because he's in a video game, because their whole world is a video game, because right from the off you are told the Simpsons know they are in the Simpsons game, and what you are playing isn't even... You're not playing like an adventure that we're portraying as a video game.
Yeah.
The video game world of The Simpsons is locked to this game. This game is technically outside of the series of The Simpsons.
Yeah, and actually it kind of goes beyond that, because it's the start of the moment where Bart finds the instruction manual. That's the start of the second level. But even the first level is like a dream sequence that is a direct reference to something that happens in an actual episode of The Simpsons, the Land of Chocolate episode. But the first in-game quip that the White Rabbit says to you is, maybe you'd do better in a turn-based RPG.
Yes, yeah. And like, so right from the off.
And that's
just...
like, you've got once the pre-rendered cutscene's finished, literally the first thing that is said in an in-engine cutscene is a reference to the fact that it's a video game.
Yeah, and the thing is, it doesn't get less of a fever dream from there.
No, in
like,
fact, it gets more.
This game, like, by the end of this game, I was staring at... I don't want to say what the final boss is just yet, because I don't want to spoil it too early on. And I think we will spoil this game, because I've got a lot to say about the plot, I think.
I have something to... I mean, we definitely have to talk about the ending.
But by the time you get there, this game is like... So they do some of the things from Treehouse of Horror, which, okay, fair enough. You're a Simpsons video game. You want to reference all the things people like. Of course, chuck in some Treehouse of Horror. It's also like a good way to raise the stakes. Like, I think one of the things that's very difficult with a franchise like The Simpsons is because even in the television show, the stakes can get weirdly high.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned the monorail episode, the scale of the monorail episode is that the town might be destroyed.
Yeah.
And that's a significant step up from like previous episodes, such as The Simpsons go camping and it goes a bit wrong.
Yeah.
Like the scale on things that can happen is huge. So I get why bringing in Kang and Kodos and having an alien invasion in a Simpsons game makes sense. It's also something Simpsons Hit and Run did. It's something that The Simpsons has kind of embraced as a thing, is that sometimes aliens turn up and things get weird.
It's the only thing you could do if you were making a video game, really. I mean, if you were making a Simpsons video game, I don't think you could make a Simpsons video game that doesn't in some way involve Treehouse of Horror plots. I mean, maybe...
I don't think you could now. But one of the things that's quite entertaining about... Well, so this is the thing. We're gonna compare it to Hit and Run because it's something there. Hit and Run has a really bizarre plot. Like, not just a plot that's like, oh, the Simpsons are in a video game and meta. Like, the Simpsons video game plot in Hit and Run is like there are robot bees.
Yeah.
And Buzz Cola is a mind control, and it's kind of like a nightmare you had about the Simpsons once. It's kind of like a dream you half remember, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. And this game is that dream, but also you've got the flu. Like the way this game's plot expands and changes and evolves, and the type of references they keep making, and the way that the game works is like, it's not that it's not coherent. It's just that the whole thing feels like I'm ill.
That's a wonderful way of putting it. Well, I mean, it makes sense, because the thing about Hit and Run is, I didn't get too far in Hit and Run because...
Very few people did. It's a surprisingly hard game if you try and beat it.
It's the reason why. I mean, the reason why I imagine most people who played the Simpsons game finished the Simpsons game, and that's because around the Simpsons Hit and Run, what you've got like the sort of just mess around sandbox that you can find. It's obviously not as rich as a non-licensed sandbox game, I would say, but you can still have hours of fun in Simpsons Hit and Run. And even though I'm championing this game, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find hours of fun in the Springfield open world of the Simpsons game.
Yeah, I hard vetoed the open world when I figured out pretty quickly I did not need to do it, and there were bus stops that allowed me to fast travel to the next episode, and I was like, great.
We have something to talk about later on in the episode then.
Okay. So this is the thing. I just did not do the open world section at all because I could tell it was like not exactly filler, but like I started comparing it to a Lego game as I was playing it. In that the game's like there's loads of collectibles and they're character specific collectibles.
Yeah,
like character specific collectibles are a dreadful idea. You should never put them in a video game.
Well, I mean,
it reminded me of Donkey Kong 64, which is not a game I could say I've played in big inverted commas, but like you turn up and you're like, I found a thing. No, I didn't. I have to go get the other guy and bring them here.
I think character-specific collectibles, they can be okay if the heartbreaking thing about the open world in the Simpsons game is the amount of collectibles they fit into the open world. And the open world's fine in terms of size, and the number of collectibles is more than perhaps it can fit. It's heartbreaking to be walking around as like Homer and Lisa and to see a Marge collectible and having to make a mental note of, I have to come back as Marge, because the sheer density of collectibles. And that does become a little bit kind of paddy. Like there's sort of, I don't think paddy's a word. There is padding, is maybe what I should say.
Yeah.
Because that makes sense.
And like you can tell there's also padding because there's a time trial mode.
Yeah, and again, this is all stuff that I should say, because I keep making mention of this is stuff we should circle back to. I played this game, like I said, I played this game when I got my PlayStation 3, and I got my PlayStation 3 in 2008 or something. I played it then, and I finished the story, I think, in the same year, and then I just didn't pick it up again. I played a little bit here and there, maybe like once every 3 years or so, and I picked it up and played it again in preparation for this, because I actually physically lent you my copy, and I thought before I bring it to you, I should I should go back and make sure, because what I remembered in my head is the phrase "better than it should be," and I played it, and because of the way I play video games, genuinely, and I can say this with absolute certainty, I would have played the Simpsons game again more recently if they had patched in PlayStation Network trophies. If they had put those in, I would have played it immediately after, because that's the kind of dickhead I am. Like it's a compulsion I have, and they still haven't patched them in. And I thought, I wonder if it's worth going for 100% in this game. That would be interesting. And so I tried, and basically, when it comes to you criticising some of the elements of this game, I am going to be very hard-pressed to agree with you, or to defend it in some way, because I tried to go for 100%, and my advice is, don't do that. Don't go for 100%. That. No, it's because I can tell you what you get, and what you get is not a lot. I didn't get to 100%, I ran out of time before I had to bring it to you, but I got to 97%. And the last 20% was as long as completing the campaign and was in no way as delightful.
Well, this is the thing. The thing that made it so that I did actually finish this game just in time for this podcast, the thing that made me want to keep going ahead with it, and the thing that I'm going to give it as the biggest praise, is that it really is a game that is like, I am not going to sit still. Yeah. It is constantly, every level has some unique element to it, even if it's just the case that they've just changed the aesthetic. Yeah. You've got, like, each of the Simpsons has a unique set of powers, and they basically range from stuff like Marge, who can rabble-rouse like townsfolk around her to form mobs to take things down.
She's a Karen.
I thought
about it really early on. I just thought, 'cause especially in some of her specific missions, I just thought that's what she's doing. She's like a sort of middle-class suburban stay-at-home mum who's got a complaint for the manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also great, like, the game is like internally satirical with that. They point out the hypocrisy of the idea that Marge is like using violence to stop the production of a violent video game. And there's a level later on in the game where you have to gentrify a neighborhood using Marge. And she literally yells gentrify.
She does, yeah. That's and I do like that pretty much she's not in that many levels, because levels that she's in have to be very specifically tailored for her. And every single one, I think, ends with some kind of like mention of Is this not hypocritical? I think in almost exactly the same way someone says, and I think it's always Lisa goes, is this not maybe just, is it not hypocritical? And Marge's response is usually, shush now.
Yes, yeah. And it's good, because I think that's a good use of... So, like, that's a good example, I think, because the gameplay there is fairly unique. It's sort of Pikmin light.
Yes.
And it's a funny use. It's like a good marriage of gameplay to character. There's a mix of mechanic and character there that makes sense in the same way that like games like the Batman Arkham series have been praised for doing that. They sort of marry the character's actions with the actual way that you interact with the world. So that was great. And then there's Homer can turn into a big bouncy rubbery ball and zoom about the map, kind of like a combination of Katamari Damacy and Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, he's the most fun character to sort of like in terms of sandbox. One of the best things to do in a sandbox is travel, and he is the best traveler.
Yes, definitely. And he can also fill himself with helium in a mode that is less fun. And then he can also turn himself into Gummy Homer, which is sort of I don't actually know what that one is a reference to.
No, I'm not sure, but I can tell you it is the most useful power he has.
Yeah, it basically gives him a ranged attack.
It does,
which means that, like, in the game, Homer is the best all-rounder. Homer has the most things he can do.
Well, Homer's the best all-rounder because he's, in terms of... It's kind of, you can really see it in the upgrades that they get, because they do get character-specific upgrades as the story goes on. It's not like but it's not like a Metroidvania-style upgrade where you can then go back to earlier levels. It affects the open world area, but that's kind of it. But the when Homer gets his upgrades, everyone's kind of got their own base power, and I would say everyone has one. Lisa has two, but Homer, like, it's almost as if they had to limit themselves to three, because whenever he gets a power, it's a new power. Whenever another character gets an upgrade, it's the current power is slightly better.
Yeah, or has some new twist on it.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So Homer's quite fun to play as, brackets, unless, like, when you're walking around as Homer, he's quite tedious to play as. He has the worst jump of all the characters, which makes sense. He's the least suited to having a double jump, but he still has one.
Yeah.
You've then got Lisa, who I think has the best power in the game.
Lisa was... Lisa was a character that I did not care for when I was younger, really. But having played it again, I think she may be she may be my favourite.
Yes, so her power is a power called Hand of Buddha, which, side note, is this a weird thing to incorporate Buddhism as a superpower? Anyway, she can, like, basically, she goes to specific areas where there's a shrine, and then she can use a giant hand to pick up and move things in the environment, usually to do things like build bridges, but it's also quite effective at fighting enemies because you can pick up and drop, like, barrels or cars, and you can also, like, flick enemies, and then later on summon lightning and freeze powers. And, like, I think Lisa's Hand of Buddha power, in another video game, you could have made that, like, almost the entire video game. There's, like, a whole slew of things you could do with that interaction that were actually really interesting and quite fun. And the game does pretty well with it.
It does all right. One of the things I would say, and is it's very... I don't know why I'm saying this, because I am actually... I'm quite a big fan of this podcast, and I know that you're not really going to hold back on criticism, and I know that we're roughly at the arc of the sort of storyline where you're about to give me a kicking.
Oh yeah. There's a character we've not talked about yet who I've deliberately held off on.
Oh, okay. But one of the problems I have with the Hand of Buddha power is it's a little bit. It never really unchains. It's always contextual. Like it's very much a bit hand-holdy. Like when you're constructing bridges, that sounds good, but really what it amounts to is dropping a billboard vaguely near a billboard-shaped hole, and the game will do the rest. It's not physics or systems based. Yeah,
which is kind of what I'm getting at. Which is, if you were to make it physics or systems based, you could probably make a whole video game out of this premise. Yeah, but instead, you're working with a game that has a lot of mechanics. Like, the thing I like about it is, let's keep changing the story. Let's keep changing the tape. Okay, you're playing as Lisa and Bart in this one. Okay, now you're playing as Marge and Homer. Okay, now it's Lisa and Marge. And, like, there's a constant sense in this game of keep things moving, keep changing, keep it interesting.
Yeah, and it does a good job. I mean, early on, the first 3 levels kind of start off a bit slow, because the first level's Homer on his own. Because that's another thing about this game. I mean, the explanation of it seems almost as ramshackled and almost improvised as the game itself.
Yeah.
But every level, barring the first level, has two characters because of for co-op reasons, in quotes. And I assume I assume we will also talk about that. But
well, I never managed to actually play the game in co-op.
Is that because Louise took one look at it and went, "I'm better than this"?
No, it's because I started playing it and I went, "There is no way that this game is better in co-op." Like when I was playing it, I got this feeling of like, this is very much a game where one player stands on a switch and waits for another player to do the thing.
Yeah. Again,
like this is the thing, the game in that regard. So this is the thing, you can hot swap between the two characters during the level, and you have to, because the characters have unique powers and you have to use their unique powers to get past certain sections. As a result, it reminded me a lot of a video game I had on the PS1 called Bugs and Taz Time Busters.
Oh. I was fully ready for you to make a reference to the one that I was thinking of, which is just any Lego game, and then you...
No, because the Lego games tend to keep the characters on the same screen. The thing that's very clever about the Lego games is that they don't really put you in massive environments, so you can't get too far away from each other. Whereas Bugs and Taz Time Busters is, like, again, this is a detour, but I'm going to tell you about it because it's too interesting not to. The premise of Bugs and Taz Time Busters is that you are playing as both Bugs Bunny and Taz the Tasmanian Devil.
Yeah.
And you have to hot swap between the two of them constantly because they have different powers and they require each other sometimes to solve things.
Yeah.
But one of the things the game will do is you can't really play it co-op because basically you have to pick which character has the camera. And so if one of you has the camera and the other player doesn't follow that person, who knows where you are? Who knows what's going on in your life? There's no split screen in this game. It is not viable as a split screen game. But you can plug in a second controller if for some reason you want to have that sort of Sonic 2 level of interaction with the game. But as a result, it's also like you'll play a huge amount of the level and then go, oh, I need Taz. And then you press a button and Taz is at the start of the level. He didn't go anywhere.
That's more... I mean, the thing about the one point that the Simpsons game has over... I mean, I did not think I would be... I can't even remember that Bugs and Taz Time Busters.
Oh.
Is that it?
Bugs and Taz Time Busters. It's not a great game, but it's very memorable. It's very unique.
I mean, it sounds it. I mean, you say that doesn't have split screen. The Simpsons game has split screen. Which is a point over... Because I am very fond of the Lego games. Because to me, they kind of harken back to a sort of logical evolution of Spyro the Dragon. Like, they're
okay.
Well, they're cut from a similar cloth. Like that, They're not at all the same game, but they're kind of because the sort of combination of collectathon with kind of having to return back later on is sort of what I mean. Like a clear visible, I can't get there just yet. And, that's a very broad stroke from someone who clearly played only like 5 or 6 different PS1 games and then branched out in the PS3, PS4 sort of generation. I don't have any interesting things to pull out of my bag, like Bugs and Taz Time Busters.
You wait. One day I'm going to get to talk about Sheepdog and Wolf, and that's going to be great.
It sounds like you're the person who programmed the games onto the PlayStation Classic.
Oh no, the PlayStation. If I had made the PlayStation Classic, Sheepdog and Wolf would have made that list. Absolutely, that would have.
I mean, the PlayStation Classic. How many of those games had you heard of?
Oh, we're doing this thing. We're very easily distracted on this episode. Right, look, I'm going to look up the list of PlayStation Classic games while also talking about the Simpsons game.
Okay.
Right, the thing with it. Right, the final character that I hadn't talked about was Bart.
Yeah.
And Bart is the most annoying character to play in this game by quite a long shot, because here are Bart's powers. Bart can climb on vines, like any video game character should be able to do.
Yeah.
Bart can glide, for most of the game, really badly and imprecisely.
Yeah, okay.
And Bart has a slingshot that is mostly crap.
Yeah,
it just does so little damage.
Compared to... That's why I said that Gummy Homer was really useful, because he gets a ranged attack, and the thing is, Bart always has a ranged attack, and it is not sufficient.
Yeah, and it's just an absolute... So playing as Bart is really tedious, and it's really annoying because all of Bart's powers are like things that should have been there by default.
Well, he's designed to be... his moveset is very similar to... I mean, obviously it's similar to Batman, but it's similar to Batman in the Arkham games.
No.
I laid that trap for you.
Because... Well, for one thing, so he's got a grapple hook that's the most context-specific grapple hook in any video game I've ever played.
Well,
like, it might as well be just... It's just an excuse to make it so that only Bart can go somewhere.
Well, but that's the thing. It's the most useful for, like... I guess it's like every character's got a sort of specialty thing. And Bart's specialty thing is he's mainly the sort of... Even though Homer's the most fun to travel with, Bart's the most useful. Like, that's why he... The climbing vine. Now, if you're gonna attack Bart for because he is very useful at traveling, and I can say as someone who did dabble in the open world, he gets, once you've got all his powers, he's actually not terrible to travel with. But I will.
Yeah, his glide requires the upgrade.
The upgrade.
If you don't have his upgrade on the glide, it's just awful.
Well, it goes from almost nothing to actually beneficial.
Yeah.
But the one thing that, again, I will lay down my sword and allow you a point in this fencing match we're having, is the vine climbing is unforgivably terrible.
So look, this is why I find Bart annoying. It's not because Bart has these powers and these powers. Look, vine climbing is boring in every video game I've ever played.
No, but it's so bad. It's not that it's boring. It's that it's like so often one of the earliest vine climbing sections. If you jump, you'll jump away from what you're trying to climb up. If you move to the left, you'll not move it to the left enough and you'll fall down. And for some reason, you won't grab the vines as you go down. You'll have to go all the way back down and you have to start again. It's the worst thing ever.
But this is the thing.
Best video game you've never played, by the way.
I expect the ability to climb vines or ladders or netting to be something that just any character can do. And playing as Homer as a big bouncy ball is fun.
Yeah.
Playing with Lisa's Hand of Buddha thing is fun.
Yeah.
Using Marge's Pikmin Light stuff, it's fun.
Yeah.
Climbing things is not fun.
No,
And neither is gliding when the glide is really bad for most of the game.
And the zip line isn't great either.
The zip line is just context. The zip line is just a press button. Only Bart can go here. Off he goes.
But
it's not a mechanic. It's a gate.
But of all the characters, when you get there, they have these temporary upgrade things that you can get. Bart's is the best.
No, it's not. It's the worst. He just gets better slingshot.
No, he gets the lasers. Homer's is
sorry. You mean, yes, we should. I thought you meant when they get the final upgrade before the last few levels of the game. No, you mean the sort of temporary power-ups you can find in levels that are and now your character is invulnerable and has improved in some way. And his is the best. You're right. He gets a laser, infinite firing laser that can go through glass.
But the reason why is because he's ceased to be the movement character and become the fighting character, and you realise that I guess it sort of measures up to the fact that when unupgraded, all the characters as a whole aren't all that useful, Homer aside, because all of Bart's things kind of represent that lack of ability. The fact that his slingshot is so weedy. The fact that his glide is, every time you finish gliding, you expect the game to just go, oh, what?
Yeah, and it's usually you need to jump and glide, and I'll jump and glide, and the game's no, you got it slightly wrong, so you're falling into this pit of lava or water or whatever, and you're going to have to do it again. And it's just okay, all right.
Yeah, but
it's just a bit
it's nice, though,
it's not fun. It's not so the gliding in Spyro is fun.
Yes,
the gliding in Spyro is satisfying to pull off, and there's a trick with the hover at the end, and it's this. It's this, and it's something that you can do anywhere in the game. And it's sometimes it's specifically how you solve a puzzle, and sometimes it's just how you get around, and it's fun, and it's a way to skip over a bit. And in this game, the glide is only useful in specific circumstances, and it's never satisfying to use. And I feel like that represents Bart's problem, is that his mechanic, the main thing he can do that's an actual traversal or combat thing that the other characters can't do, is both boring and badly implemented.
Okay, I understand that, and I kind of, when I was playing through it and I was measuring up all the characters, I came to that conclusion quite early on as well. Like,
yes, yeah.
if ever it was a Bart level, I would switch to the better alternative. And
Yes,
I first thought that Bart would be better at combat, but as soon as I started playing as Lisa, I thought, no, actually, Lisa's better at combat.
Yes, because Lisa has the ability to make enemies her ally.
That's an upgrade. She doesn't have that.
And it's a cheap upgrade. Like you can just like. It's not like with each of the characters you have like a power meter that you need to charge, and then like when you reach a certain quota, you can pull off a super move.
Yeah.
Lisa's standard move that isn't charged is better than her super move because it turns enemies into allies.
The super move is pretty useful for like just damage per second. Like I would find myself using it all the time for certain but you're right, as soon as it's upgraded and you toot the saxophone once and every enemy in a quite close radius becomes an ally, and that's a real distraction for the combat, which I assume is another thing you're going to pull out the bag at some point.
Oh boy, the combat in the Simpsons game. Very early on.
What I will say is
no, come on. Let me tell the listener first what it's about.
No, but what I just want to say this. I'm not going to defend the combat. What I am going to say is this is completely justifying what I made up in my head, which was listening to you complain about Oblivion would maybe not make the best podcast, but it would delight me to no end to sit with you for an hour while you tell me why I'm wrong. And I'm enjoying it so far.
Here's the thing now with the Simpsons combat.
Yeah.
Very early on in the game, there is a tutorial tooltip that pops up that says press square, square, triangle to pull off a power combo.
Yeah.
And I sort of chuckled to myself and went, what video game doesn't use square, square, triangle as the combo? I think every action beat 'em up I can ever think of is button, button, different button. That's the combo for the game. And I thought, okay, it's early in the game. It's an early tooltip. Surely the combat, it does not. It does not change in the slightest. Every single level requires square, square, triangle. Yeah. It's not just square, 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 triangle. It is specifically square, square, then triangle. You cannot just press triangle when you want to end the combo. You cannot go triangle, square. You have to go square, square, triangle, and you have to do it over and over and over again in every single level, because every single level is full of enemies. The main way that you fight them is square, square, triangle. Maybe you use one of the powers that we talked about earlier. Maybe if you get lucky, you'll get one of the powers. But then when that runs out of power meter, square, square, triangle. And do it forever. And it's just infuriating because at no point in the game did I like square, square, triangle. At no point in the game was I like, oh good, square, square, triangle's back. We're going to have a great time playing square, square, triangle. No, I was like, I can't wait for this section to end because round the corner there's probably something quite fun to do. There's probably going to be the bit where the hand of Buddha comes up, or maybe I'm going to have to do some like vaguely alright platforming or something, and it's just going to... No. Square, square, triangle, every single level, endlessly. Sometimes the game doesn't tell you that you're supposed to move on and infinitely spawns enemies until you realise that actually you aren't supposed to be doing square, square, triangle at all. You were supposed to be trying to get past these enemies because they're never going to stop coming, and it was your fault. And then sometimes you go, okay, well clearly then the game's decided that it will infinitely spawn things until I progress with the game, and that's how this game works. And then some sections it's like, no, I've just spawned an unreasonably large amount of enemies and you are supposed to kill them all. You're not supposed to progress. Stop looking for ways to progress. You're going to be killed by everything until you square, square, triangle them all. And that's what I hated about this game. That's the thing about this game that I was like, it's so annoying because it's right in this game. There are so many bits of this game I really liked, I thought were really interesting and cool, and I thought were great, and all of it was behind square, square, triangle.
I 100%. Okay, that was one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life. And, you know, I'm going to be getting married fairly soon, and I think that I'd struggle to top what just happened there.
I sincerely believe that you getting married will top that, and if it doesn't, then you have some severe psychological issues you need to deal with, because that was...
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, look, that's it. I don't want you to defend that. I don't want you to come back and tell me, oh, actually, it's okay that everything in the game is square, square, triangle when it isn't one of the... Because it's not fun. It's not fun. I died a lot in this game, and it's not because the game is like difficult in a good way. It's just arbitrary. There's like a level towards the end where you have to fight just lots and lots of lawyers.
Yeah.
Just lots and lots and lots of them. And there's like there's no way to do it. There's no way to do it in a way that isn't just boring.
Can I say, when I was playing through the game, I saw the same notification you saw of square, square, triangle, and because of the person I am, I forgot that immediately.
Oh no.
And I never did square, square, triangle until partway through when I was doing the combat. And the thing about it is, I existed purely on square. Because again, I'm a fan
that won't do any good.
Well, that's the thing. Again, I'm a fan of the Dynasty Warriors franchise, and so the square button, me and the square button have a real love-hate relationship. I love it. It fucking hates me. But basically, if you just do square, there's a like 80% chance that someone will block your attack, and it doesn't matter what you do. There's no visual cue that it's not happening, but you'll just be punching forever. And when I remembered, oh yeah, square, square, triangle, I cannot tell you how satisfying square, square, triangle was. Because... But
did you not find, like, if it was like... I think it would be okay if it was triangle ends the combo.
I see what you're saying, and I do disagree with that. Because I only disagree with what you said about how it specifically has to be square, square, triangle. Because I found that if I mashed square a bunch of times, because I don't know if what it wants is for me to press square, square, triangle, or for me to press triangle at the point where 2 attacks have landed. And obviously when you're in combat like that, you don't press square for every time you want to land a punch. You mash square like your life depends on it. Yeah. So I found myself doing both, and it was quite forgiving with both of them, because there's a real kind of visual feedback that the triangle has landed. And
but there's nothing fun about it.
Well...
There's nothing fun about the beat 'em up combat in this game, because it's not it's not like just for 2 examples, it's not like Bayonetta, where there's like heaps of combos to learn, and the game's also very good at like everything can bleed into each other, and there's this sort of very strong sense of flow throughout the combat.
Yeah.
And it's not like Batman Arkham games, where
it's
like
kind of rhythmic almost.
Yeah, where it's like there are specific cues you need to look out for. If you know what you're doing in this, you can perfectly like win this scenario. Yeah. Instead, it's like an old school cabinet beat 'em up game, where it's just like mash the punch button, mash the kick button, mash the punch button, mash the kick button, but not in a way that's like discernibly fun. Not in a way that's like gonna. Nothing about beating up things in this game was ever satisfying to me. Everything is either a pushover or a nightmare to kill, and nothing in between.
What you can then I'm not going to stop grinning for the next few weeks. But the thing about that is the square, square, triangle, that's where you then use the other powers. And that's where you then use that, because you said that Lisa's like charge thing isn't that useful, but everyone's like charged power meter move can really save you a bunch of square, square, triangles. It can really save them. I would say Marge's is probably the best, because of like how focused and yet widespread
it's just
damage
a blast.
Is.
It's just a blast that does a lot of damage.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of similar to Homer's, but I feel like Homer's doesn't have quite as big of a stretch. But it's
the thing. Yeah, the thing is, it's just that it was the least interesting part of the game, and it's 70% of the game.
That's true, and I'm one of the things that I'm amazed by is I knew that it's not a good foundation to build your game on, but you hated it so much that you said, and I quote, "The platforming is fine."
Yeah,
and it's not.
Do you not think? I thought the platforming was fine in this game.
The platforming. I can't believe that. Basically, what's going to happen now is the one thing that you liked, I'm then going to persuade you is shit.
I don't think it was good. I'm not saying it's like a reason to play this game, but I didn't at any point. I think maybe I found one section quite irritating because the camera wouldn't behave.
The camera's a real issue. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was generally all right, I thought. I thought it was like... It played like I would expect a 3D platformer to play.
Well, it varies from... There's a slight range of things, and it ranges from fine to the worst thing that has ever happened to humanity, even outside of the video games industry. and the camera is a real issue in that. Climbing poles I found to be an issue, and these issues all stem from the fact that I was also trying to collect all the things, so I had to do an awful lot of the optional platforming stuff. And there's a lot of, one of the cool things about it is it's got. Did you ever play Ukulele?
Yes, I have played Ukulele.
Ukulele's got this odd thing about it where if you are familiar with 3D platformers, you look around the landscape and you kind of in your head autofill in what will be an invisible wall and what won't be. But actually, if you're in Ukulele and you try and jump off some of like the background geometry, you'll find that it's tangible, and you can do some like insane things on it, and it all seems like it's fairly baked in. And I think a lot of the stuff that I found on Ukulele, I think I found in a way that was perhaps not the way that, I mean, I guess it's intentional in some way because someone must have let that happen, but
it might not be.
Yeah, there's a good chance.
There's a good chance they just made background geometry solid, and the payoff was you found a ridiculous way to get some of the items.
Yeah, and I found myself in the Simpsons game testing what geometry was tangible and finding ways through it, because I was shooting for 100%, and even though I didn't get it, I did put in a significant amount of work into getting it. And so what I found is I was finding ways around using the geometry, and more of it's tangible than you would think. So in that way, I quite like the platforming, because it feels like if you're good at platforming, you get rewarded by doing things that you perhaps shouldn't be allowed to do.
Well, I think you and I are playing this game in a very different way, in that you're going for that completionism, trying to collect everything, and I'm just trying to get through the story of the game.
You're playing it in a way that I think if we were to, in some way, because I actually think that this game's worth looking at, and I would recommend playing it the way you played it. I would recommend nobody plays it the way I play it, and I see me as a cautionary tale. I mean, I can be the sign that says, "Here there be trolls."
It's a tough one for me to suggest. It's a tough one for me to suggest. I would recommend it to someone. Like, I'm not sure who I would recommend it to. Not to say that it's like really, really bad.
It's very,
or like really, really specific. It's just that it's like, if you're a fan of The Simpsons,
it's not the right era of The Simpsons.
Yeah, but even then, it's like it's a game that's clearly made for fans of The Simpsons, because it is brimming with Simpsons references. It can't stop itself for Simpsons references. Some of these Simpsons references are like a fun idea. One of the levels in the game is that you fight the Lard Lad from the Treehouse of Horror, where he's going around stomping with the donut. That's a cool idea for a level in a Simpsons game, because that's a reference that makes sense, that's great. Yeah. In that same level, when you finish it, the reveal is that it's Sideshow Bob working with the aliens. Now, this isn't relevant. Yeah. That's not a revelation that's like, oh, that's what's been going on. The characters even go, "Why are you here?" Yeah. And he says, "Don't think about it," and then steps on a rake. And that is the end of the... and it's like, I'm there, and I'm a fan of The Simpsons. I know why that reference has happened. And I'm like, no, that's not why I like that joke. Yeah. That joke isn't, ha-ha, Sideshow Bob stepped on the rake. The joke with that is originally the weird mundanity of the fact that he endlessly steps on the same rakes over and over again.
Basically,
joke.
That joke is the seed that then grew into Family Guy.
Yeah, and this game has very Family Guy-ish writing. There's loads of just references for references' sake.
That's the background stuff. There's a lot of there's an awful lot.
No, there's direct references throughout the story that just grind stuff to a halt. Like at one point, Willie does a reference to Planet of the Apes because he sees like a novelty Statue of Liberty.
Yeah,
and then there's another point where. I can't even remember what it is. No, that was it. You throw a parody version of Donkey Kong into some lava, and he does the thumbs up from Terminator 2.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're like, you're just reminding me of things that you like, and it doesn't make sense. There's no joke to this beyond you recognise that thing.
It's really odd that they do that as well, because there's a lot of those direct things are like, I actually hadn't recalled those when I was talking about it. The background stuff is basically what it basically is parody puns, and I'm a little bit of a sucker for that. And I got some joy looking at all the posters, like just knocking around some of the levels.
Yes, and there's like Sitar Hero. And, yeah, and like that stuff's fine. I don't
Metal
mind
Gear
that stuff.
Soiled.
Yes, yeah.
Just things like that, yeah. And
so that's another thing about it that I think we should talk about, is that we've been discussing the Simpsons side of the game.
Yeah.
But this game is basically the highest budget parody of video games I've ever seen. Yeah. Like, there are full level parodies that make fun of Katamari Damacy, Pokemon, they make fun of Medal of Honor. Yeah. One of the recurring bad guys you have to beat up is footballers from NHL.
Yeah, and Ryu as well.
NFL. Ryu as well, yeah, parody version of Ryu. Mario and Sonic are in it in a sort of like depressed version of themselves.
Yeah, and the Koopas as well. That's the thing. That's when you were saying about the direct references, I actually felt a pang of disappointment, because the thing is, it has references like that, but they're done in sort of like clever ways, because if you stand around and listen to the depressed looking Sonic the Hedgehog, he'll make references to Sonic the Hedgehog that are themselves jokes. Like he'll talk about like Eggman, and he'll make some kind of quip about that and stuff like that. And that's why I was kind of disappointed when you reminded me of those things that clearly my brain was protecting me from.
Well, this is the thing. The video game side of this game is quite good. Those jokes do land quite well. And it's quite interesting that the penultimate 4 levels of the game, so there's like the way the game opens up is that you do have like the ability to choose different episodes at different times. You do have to beat them all to progress, but like you can go to different ones and just do them in any order. And the last 4 in this game are direct parodies of video games that you have to go into as the Simpsons to collect key cards, which is the classic video game trope.
Yeah, which they do draw attention. Obviously, when you say something's a classic video game trope, they obviously draw attention to it.
Yes, there's a section that parodies Space Invader. There's a section that parodies Missile Command.
Yeah.
Pokemon. Pokemon. There's a reference to Adventure on the Atari. Yeah. And this stuff's like, I'm playing this and I'm like, this is the game that it should have been the whole time. Even though this is also the stage where the plot of the game is the most bizarre, surreal, and like I say, that feeling of just feeling unwell. Like, just this idea that like Homer and Marge are now like elves in an EverQuest parody, and they're rounding up hobbits of Ralph to fight troll Moe's, and there's just this feeling in my head of like, oh, I'm gonna pass out in a sec.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
And like, but that was the most interesting part of the game, and there's a part of me that's like, why didn't you make this game? Why is it that this ending section here, which is definitely making the best use of all the mechanics, and is definitely the most visually interesting and the most like satisfying premise that you've come up with. Why did I have like 3 or 4 levels at the start that felt like an exaggerated episode of The Simpsons? Then 3 or 4 levels that were like Treehouse of Horror, but like the seriously unfunny Treehouses of Horror.
Well, the Treehouse of Horror that, like, the joke about the Treehouse of Horror is that each one's like 7 minutes long, so it's just long enough to set up a premise and then do all the jokes within it. But obviously in a video game, the premises are set up, and now you have to play the premises for however long it takes for it to stop being quaint.
Yeah, and then and this is the thing, is that's kind of what I felt like the video game levels succeeded in. Was that you would go in and they were very high on novelty, and I don't mean that as a criticism. I think the novelty in this game is where it succeeds. The fact that it keeps changing, the fact that each level is very, very unique in a lot of different ways.
It seems to have been made by one of the things that struck me most is it's such a in some ways it's such a high quality kind of licensed game, because it seems like everyone along the way was a fan of A, the source material, and B, video games. So the Rise of the Simpsons clearly came across as video game fans, and it goes beyond like whenever you hear like Donkey Kong, Mario, and Sonic references, you kind of roll your eyes and think, okay, it's going to be sort of Pixels level kind of references of like, oh, do you remember video games from the 80s and no further? But if you look at the background detail and even some of the future levels, like the references are very contemporary. And then obviously you've got the fact that the whole thing was made to feel, and it does feel like an episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah, they've done a good job. The graphical style from a distance works pretty well.
I wanted to say about the graphics, because one of the things I noticed about the graphics is if you pan around, no matter how much you pan around with the camera, it looks like every character is their 2D cartoon drawing, which is not what you can say for Simpsons Hit and Run.
Yeah, hit and run Simpsons are the most terrifying things that have ever been rendered in a video game.
It's awful.
Like Lisa alone is the most scary thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, because every single spine on her head has been like, each one is a cone. And Bart, it's canon that Bart actually looks like he's wearing a crown. He's got like an actual dip in his hair. It's so, because they're like, we've got to render it in 3D. But the graphics, as much as they're like early PS3 kind of... And at the time, I would have defended the graphics, saying, "No, it looks great." It doesn't, but
it looks good at a distance.
The art style,
like so long as you don't zoom in on any of the character models, which the game does during like in-engine cutscenes, which is a big mistake, and they should not have done those.
The in-engine cutscenes are just generally a mistake because, well, for one thing, I would say the in-engine cutscenes are funnier than the pre-rendered ones. I got more laughs out of I kind of kept notes of jokes that I enjoyed. And the in-engine cutscenes were sort of higher quality on average than the pre-rendered cutscenes, which is kind of indicative of late Simpsons, because there's a kind of joke style to late Simpsons that kind of turns me off a bit. There's a sort of rhythm to jokes that it's so odd because I couldn't explain it to you, but I could point it out every time it happens and say that's a new Simpsons trope, and I'm not keen on it.
Well, this is the thing. There's a joke early on in the game where Bart finds the manual and says, "Wow, we're in a game. I thought the only game we played was that we pretend that Dad isn't an alcoholic."
Yeah.
And like that joke, I'm like, that's the like whip smart Simpsons humor that really lands for me. I thought that joke was great.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like Sideshow Bob steps on a rake because that's what Sideshow Bob does.
Yeah.
And we like it when Sideshow Bob turns up.
I watched that episode fairly recently, and I knew what the most popular episodes the ones that people generally said were the funniest. The episode where he steps on the rake, I would say is the best episode. And it's amazing that it's so consistently, like, it's almost like a series of vignettes, and every single like 2-minute vignette has at least one smaller joke and one major joke that seems to consistently land. And I did feel my eyes roll slightly when they did that, because it was just a reference to the most famous thing that happens in that episode.
Yeah, and it's just because this is what I was saying, like, the people who wrote this game are clearly fans of The Simpsons, because clearly there was a discussion that they went, well, Sideshow Bob has to turn up. You know, you can't do a Simpsons thing without Sideshow Bob. And I feel like that's like anathema to writing. You can't just put something in because the audience would like the reference. It's like, no, what if you're putting Sideshow Bob in this, he needs to have a relevant reason to be in the game, and if he doesn't fit, take him out. I
would say it's not something that if I got to the end of this game and Sideshow Bob wasn't in it, I don't think I would care, because he's definitely a major part of The Simpsons in terms of quality. Like, generally speaking, I mean, first of all, Kelsey Grammer is always amazing.
He seems very game for playing Sideshow Bob, because I feel like Sideshow Bob is a very fun character, but he also directly makes fun of Kelsey Grammer's politics. So, you know, in some respects, fair play.
Yeah, he's I think that's sort of testing him. But the thing is, I mean, I don't know a lot about Kelsey Grammer, but what I do know is the film that came out fairly recently, Money Plane. So I think to some extent, Kelsey Grammer maybe he owes people some money, and he needs he just needs that kind of regular paycheck, because early appearances are definitely high quality, and I imagine, like most things in The Simpsons, it's kind of trailed off slightly, and especially that role, like, you know, it won't have been sold to him on the script, because
possibly not. No, I think probably took it because there was good money. Well, look, actually, something we haven't even said, and it is something that is to this game's credit, they got everyone in. Everyone's voice is the correct voice.
They did, and that's something that actually you slightly missed out on by not doing the open world, because the open world kind of has, like, I would say a rotation of maybe 50 characters who are, some of them are like inexorably linked to The Simpsons, and some are kind of only like recognizable if you've watched quite a few episodes. And it is quite enjoyable to see NPCs. Every single NPC is someone you know. There's never an NPC in the open world or anything like that who isn't recognizable and immediately like that's why they are there. And they have some fun lines, and again it's more like a kind of it's like those apps you could get in the early sort of iPod App Store, where it was like a kind of catchphrase generator, and it's kind of it's sort of reliable fun to just wander around, and every now and then you'll see a character and you'll be like, I'm going to go over and see what this character has to say. And
well, I got a little bit of that, but I hated that.
Okay.
But I hated that because you're right. They're all recognizable characters from the show.
Yeah.
And they're all wandering around just doing whatever. But they're all just saying their lines. And again, it's that whole thing of there's no context.
Yeah.
Like, the context of the jokes that these people are saying are not occurring to them. Like, I came across Hans Moleman. I love Hans Moleman. Hans Moleman is one of the funniest, like, punchline characters in The Simpsons. Yeah. And he just says, "Oh, you're doing your work today, Mr. Sun."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a punchline to a visual gag that's not happening right now.
Yeah.
Right now, he's walking down the street. There's no reason for him to say this.
You get a bit more out of it if you talk to them as certain characters have character-specific comebacks if you turn up and talk to them as a certain character. And that's kind of what I mean. Because I do agree that because you'll walk up and if you've watched a few episodes of The Simpsons, you could even place where the punchline comes from. And the problem with The Simpsons is there aren't many characters that exist on punchline alone. And frankly, the ones that do aren't great. Like, the ones who, like, turn up and, I would say you don't really need a lot of context around what Disco Stew says, for instance.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily find Disco Stew randomly saying, "Ooh, yeah," inherently funny.
That's what I mean.
It's just something that's happening near me.
That's that's the thing. Isn't that enough though? But that's.
I mean, look. One of the game's options is to turn down the verbosity of how many times characters say their lines, and by the end, I really had to turn that down. Yeah, there is. There's an option to make them talk less.
Oh my god, that's amazing though.
It's good that it's in there, but it's a real telling sign that it's in there.
I guess I see that as more like a sort of I don't know. I see that as more of a sort of fourth wall break that it maybe doesn't deserve to see. When I'm talking about Disco Stew, what I mean is he's a character who like the funniest thing he could say is a tightly packed punchline, and that's not a good thing because he's not the funniest character.
Yeah. And I think like it's just. It does have that video game quip problem, which a lot of games, particularly games that are trying to be comedy games, have, which is where they just load the level with like, Bart has 20 lines for this level.
Yeah. And
he'll say them over and over and over again, randomly.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure why. I guess it's to reassure you something's happening.
It's to get the money's worth out of the voice actors, really.
Well, they're getting their money's worth, definitely. I mean, poor, what's his name? The guy who plays Principal Skinner and Monty Burns.
Is that, it's either Hank Azaria or...
It's not Hank Azaria. Hank Azaria is gunning to be cancelled in this game because he will not stop doing foreign accents.
I know what you mean. And when
Mr. Sparkle comes back, and that does not fly these days.
No, and I'll admit, when I got to that level, because this is something else we'll circle back round to, is... the sort of dawning realization of what I'd recommended when I started playing it again. And it was when I got to that level that I thought, oh no, am I gonna be the face of what's happening here?
No, look, it's of its era. Mr. Sparkle was already a dated reference.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but there was a point where I did just think, I'm not someone who necessarily thinks that is grounds for punishment, but it's definitely not something that I want to be like stood up on the battlement saying, "Come on, guys, you can do anything in comedy, can't you? Watch this."
No, look, it's clearly of its era. It's clearly dated.
Yeah.
And it's like, Hank Azaria, like, the history of Hank Azaria in The Simpsons is Hank Azaria would voice anyone, regardless of how much of an idea it was that was a good idea.
Yeah.
It's Harry Shearer.
Harry
Shearer
yeah.
is like 70% of the lines in this game, and he's not even one of the Simpsons. Like, he is just playing relentlessly all the NPCs in this game. And that's really impressive because it's actually quite difficult to get him. The Simpsons theme park ride does not feature Harry Shearer at all.
Okay.
He refused to be part of it.
That's odd.
So this is one of the things that's kind of interesting, that I'm surprised they got him. And I'm guessing the reason they got him is because they agreed that they wanted him to... he agreed because the writers were on board. And the writers
there's a chance
did it.
that... Because this came out a similar-ish time to the film. Do you think maybe this was made first and he was just burnt out?
This was made before the Simpsons ride.
Okay, well, maybe that's the case, but this is kind of... he's definitely... Without him, you could definitely do a Simpsons ride, but without him, this game would be a lot quieter.
It would. And look, this came out the same year as the Simpsons movie.
Did it come out It came out the same year?
Yeah, Simpsons movie came out 2007.
Okay, I thought it was 2006, but that's because the amount of research I did was I checked the Wikipedia article of the game during the brief window of time between me asking what's this call going to be on and you telling me.
But look, here's the thing, like, the Simpsons movie, I think, succeeds very well because they did a very good job of, like, the scale blew up to the size of a film, but they managed to focus it back in on the family. And that's one of the things that's very successful about the Simpsons movie and would have been a great point to end the franchise.
But
the Simpsons game is like, what if we blow up the scale and blow up the scale and then blow up the scale? Because I kid you not, this is a spoiler for the end of the game. You go and meet Matt Groening and have a boss fight with Matt Groening. And I thought, perfect. That's a really funny finale. It was really funny for Matt Groening to turn up. There's a brilliant joke he does where he's like, get those Simpsons, Violet, who's his personal assistant. And she's like, yes, Mr. Groening. It's Groening. Are you sure? No.
I enjoyed that joke, but not as much as I enjoyed the other one when they walk into the house, see him, and he says something like, it is I, TV's most beloved animator, and Homer says, Seth MacFarlane?
Yes, yeah. And it's a good joke. It's a good serious joke. And then you do a boss fight with him, and like the minions you're fighting are Zoidberg and Bender.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm there going like, this is a fun and cool finale. This feels like a great way to take this game.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It's bizarre, it's mad, it's a fever dream, but it's fine. I quite like this. I quite like this finale.
Yeah.
And then that wasn't the end of the game. Because insanely, beyond all fathomable reason, the game then goes, well, Matt Groening's gone. Who can we go to other than him? God. So Lisa builds a stairway to heaven with her magic Buddha hand power, which is already confusing because how is she using a Buddha power to go meet the Christian God? But all right. And then you go to heaven. And then you have to fight William Shakespeare as a boss.
Yeah, you do.
And then you have to get through heaven, and heaven's full of aliens and loggers.
It's full of all the enemies you fought throughout the game.
Yeah, dolphins. And
which means
sorts,
that
really. Yeah. That's for some reason they're all there. And then you have to fight Benjamin Franklin.
Yep.
Who, when you beat up, splits into smaller Benjamin Franklins.
Yeah, he does.
And then
what happens, Lewis?
And then you have to.
What happens
you have
after
to beat God in a game of DDR, Dance Dance Revolution, but it's a version of Dance Dance Revolution that doesn't actually sync to any discernible beat. It's
song
playing
are you doing?
Here I Am, Rock You Like a Hurricane, but it's a sort of dance remix of Here I Am, Rock You Like a Hurricane. And again, none of the gameplay syncs to this music. You just have to tap buttons like a cheat code, and at the end, God says, you're in a game, and I'm in a game, and the person playing this is in a game, and Ralph Wiggum's in charge. Goodbye, everyone. And it's just like, why? You had a good ending. You had a really neat little cute ending, and it was to go to Matt Groening. That was a cute idea. That was something that the show couldn't do, that like you as a video game could do, and it was a fun idea.
Yeah.
And then I can't get over the boss fight where Benjamin Franklin splits into smaller Benjamin Franklins. I'm like, why? Why is this happening?
Do you remember where he comes from as well? Like, you have to build...
Out of a Starbucks.
He
comes out of a Starbucks, and you ask him, can you let us in? And he says, no, I'm going to beat you up. And then you beat up Benjamin Franklin.
But he doesn't just come out of a Starbucks, Lewis. He comes out of a Starbucks that you built by commanding hobbits.
Yes, he does. Marge commands a group of hobbit Ralph Wiggums to build a Starbucks, so that Benjamin Franklin comes out. Prior to this, you've had to use some dolphins. You've had to freeze some dolphins to create some steam so that Homer and Bart can open the door by stepping on two switches. Like, do you know what I mean when I say this game is a fever dream? This game, like, I'm not... Anyone listening to this who thinks I'm like missing a step, or not like I didn't understand what was going on. No, the comprehensive explanation of what happened is Marge uses a series of Hobbit Ralph Wiggums to build a Starbucks that Benjamin Franklin comes out of, refuses to help you. You beat him up. He splits into smaller Benjamin Franklins. You eventually beat up the Benjamin Franklins. Once you've done that, you then go and meet God. He refuses to help you, but then you beat him in a game of DDR, and Bart threatens to throw away his memory card. And
which has the same Games of Oblivion on.
Which has the same Games of Oblivion on. So there's a wonderful circularity to all this now.
I nearly cheered.
That doesn't work because memory cards don't exist on these consoles. There's no memory card data for Oblivion. That doesn't make sense. If he was going to throw his console, that would have worked. But then God's like, oh no, you're in a game. And they're like, we know we're in a game. And then God's like, oh, but what you don't understand is that the person playing this is also in a game. And then they're like, are you in a game, God? And he's like, I'm not in a game. And I'm sat here going, well, I'm playing the game you're in. I don't... What? And then Ralph Wiggum comes in at the end, and that's the end of the game. And it's just like...
Yeah.
They gave up. They just completely lost their minds.
I will say that ending is the reason why I had fond memories of this game. It's the whole reason that game was recommended to you. Is because when I played it through initially in 2008, it's kind of ho-hum, and some of the references are cute, but then... Like, this is where it stuck with me, because I suggested the Simpsons game to you 13 years after I played it initially, because the ending is... And I didn't... whenever I would tell people about it, I didn't say DDR. I thought it was a reference to Guitar Hero. I thought you were playing Guitar Hero against God to the song Rock You Like a Hurricane by the Scorpions, and that alone was like, that's going to stick with me for ages. And it did, playing it again, I noticed the Benjamin Franklin thing, and it shows the difference between the two of us, that I was just like, yep, fair enough, okay, that's happening now, because I knew what would happen at the end. And that's the thing that this game has, is it's got so many of those moments where it's like, in a snapshot you can say, here's why you should play this game. And the reason why, and I didn't tell you about the boss fight at the end, mainly because I knew that you were going to play it. Can I just
take a moment to say it's a really rubbish boss fight?
It's a great boss fight.
No, it's a rubbish boss fight because it's a rhythm game that has no rhythm. The inputs don't match the rhythm of what you're supposed to be doing. At all. It's
a great boss fight because Rocky Like a Hurricane is a great song.
Rocky Like a Hurricane is a great song, and it's really fun to play it in Guitar Hero because the guitar syncs up with the song.
It's okay. You don't get any benefit for like waiting until the right moment to press. I'll accept. But also, one of the things you left out...
If you press wrong, it kills you.
Yeah, but you don't get it for like pressing at like the perfect moment, because I would press it.
No, you don't get it for pressing at the perfect moment. But also, the prompts don't line up.
Oh, really?
They just don't. You're just entering a cheat code.
That's odd.
It's just up, down, left, right. That's all you're doing.
That problem.
It doesn't match the music.
Okay. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because the odd thing is the music doesn't start and stop. The music plays through even in the sort of like little cutscene of like what's happening. Because the two things you left out of that boss fight, because yeah, you are playing DDR against God, but whenever you successfully hit it, what you're doing is you're doing damage to his consoles, which are all puns. Two out of three of them work as puns, and one of them I don't fully understand.
Yeah, there's the Prey Station,
which is amazing.
The Exodus box.
Yeah.
And then the He.
Yeah, the He I didn't really
I'm guessing it's he because it's like God is the capital H, he. Side note, again, I know I've kind of Lisa is a Buddhist and you're beating up the Christian God. What?
That's the other thing. I would say that
it's a distinctly Christian God. They make it pretty clear he's a Christian God.
Yeah, because the Exodus box has the old fish on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's like he references original sin and stuff like that. Like,
yeah.
It's bizarre.
Also,
it's just so bizarre.
During your breakdown, you failed to mention when you are pressing the button. Is it what notes is it that are appearing? Are they like just little like
just
in Guitar?
Random NPCs from the game.
Yeah, including Benjamin Franklin and Matt Groening appear occasionally as. So what you're doing is
Orkmo.
But they're all dancing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It just sort of happened, I'll be honest. It took me a few goes. I wasn't very good at it.
I think it took
because the rhythm doesn't match up with the notes.
I think it took you a few goes.
I can't restate that enough.
You had to digest that is the thing, because I got it first time, but the reason why I got it first time and I didn't miss a single note is because I was prepared for what was happening. I imagine you failed it the first time just because you were in shock.
Well, also it just doesn't control very well. It's look. I've stated it enough. Look, the final boss of this game is look, there's like a thing that I think is definitely true. It's definitely true of hit and run, and it's very true of a lot of PlayStation 1 games.
Yeah.
In that there's something about video games sometimes that can be quite scary. There's something about like particularly in PS1 games, the infinite void that expands outside of levels. If you ever went to the edge of a level in Spyro,
yes,
and you just sort of look out to the eternal abyss of nothing, and you're like, oh my god, this dragon lives on this platform and nowhere else. There is nothing else in the world. There's a game I love that makes very good use of that terrifying abyss as a way of explaining its world. The Simpsons game kind of feels... It feels like a sort of hell for the characters that live in it. It's like, as a game, it's pretty fun, but as like a metaphysical concept, which the game made me think about.
Yeah.
It made me think about it as a metaphysical concept. It's just it's very upsetting as an idea that anyone should have to like exist in it.
Yeah. It's creates this sort of paradigm that falls apart if you think about it for any length of time, but that's sort of the consequence of, because it's kind of, I don't know, in things that I've written, like even including like stand-up that I've written, I found that I think it maybe is a shorthand thing to do to maybe leap to a level of self-awareness. It's something that I do a lot in stand-up. It's something that I have done in other things that I've written, and I feel like because I do it, maybe I look on it like kind of derogatively, but I see it as like a kind of easy or catch-all that you could definitely do. And this game feels like it goes for that. But then it doesn't just go for it once. It kind of goes, if we're going to do this shit, we're going to do it 7 times. So it's not like, what plane of reality is this performance on? It's, you know, are we on the 5th or 6th? Like, we don't just go 1 level down. It's sort of like this unraveling, because you're right. Ralph Wiggum is the one who witnesses the end cutscene on a TV, but then he goes over and knocks on the glass, implying that you're also viewing it. But they're also saying that the people who are playing the games, so they're like, it is like 6 or 7 levels down. And at that point,
the thing is, this is right. There was a good line to draw on the meta-ness, and it was the boss fight with Matt Groening.
Yeah,
that was the correct place to draw the line on the meta-ness.
Yeah. The
problem with doing the "you're in a video game, I'm in a video game" ending is it makes everything inconsequential. It makes everything a dream. It's so ludicrous. It reminds me of the end of Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah,
where they turn up and arrest the cast of the film, and that's the end of the film. There's no satisfying conclusion to the plot at all. They deliberately basically go out their way to go, there is no plot, and the whole thing falls to pieces. Similarly, if you've seen the film Blazing Saddles, the end of the film Blazing Saddles is a mess of meta references that don't make sense. And I feel like that's what happens with this game. It's like, yes, meta-ness can be really funny and interesting, and like the game even did the most interesting meta thing that I think you could do, which was the references to other games and to put The Simpsons into other people's video games. That was the concept this game should have stuck with. That was the good idea.
Yeah.
And everything before that is mediocre to bad. including that overworld, which was a waste of resources because I bet most players don't bother with it.
The overworld, I think most players don't bother with it now. I think at the time, I think people did. And I think the reason why people did at the time is because hit and run was quite recent in people's memories. So I think...
See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that overworld is there because of hit and run. I think they were making this game and they were told, you are putting an open world in it because you are making the follow-up to Simpsons Hit and Run, like, in spirit. Even though it's clear that the game's development has no interest in being an open world game, and that, in my view, was the correct decision. There's no point making another Simpsons open world game. Hit and Run's done it. You will only pale in comparison because people really like that game, and also what they chose to do with the actual game part of the game, I think, is better than Hit and Run.
I would say that if you were to play Hit and Run through as a story game, I mean, I don't think you'd get as much out of it as you do this game. But then it comes down to, what do you prefer? Do you prefer like a sandbox or a story-based thing? And then that's where this kind of is better than Hit and Run in that aspect. But I would say that I do actually disagree with you. I mean, my opinion on this game is kind of... It's gone back and forth, and it's sort of shrouded a little bit, my opinion, and I'll sort of express it in a second. But I would say the cleverest thing it did was the final level that made you react like that, because that's the reason why it has its own identity, because it's not remarkable enough in its gameplay to be recommended on the basis of that. It's not remarkable enough in it being because it does feel like playing a Simpsons episode, but it feels like playing a Simpsons episode from like season something teen, which is brilliant. Can I? Thank you. It's not. That's not a present. That's a that's a concession.
A bit of a chore.
But the thing that it's got is it. You know, it's cool that's probably playing it most recently. And looking back, that probably was my favourite mission, is the one where you're fighting Bender and Zoidberg and Matt Groening. That's the best mission in terms of like all that. But it doesn't lend itself to expressing to people what the most sort of head-bangingly strange aspect of the game is. And it's like...
The thing is, it does feel like there's nowhere to go.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I mean,
like
there's evidence
they
in that,
said,
in the fact that it's 14 years old and they've not made a sequel because they couldn't.
Yeah, there's no The Simpsons Game 2 that makes any sense.
Yeah.
At all. Like, this is the thing. Apparently, they called it The Simpsons Game to indicate it was like a fresh start for Simpsons games, which was wrong. This was the finale. This was the last possible Simpsons game you could do that wasn't a mobile game.
I had no idea that's what they called it, and or why they called it that. And if I'd have known that I would have ridiculed it, because it's you don't start at 11. Come on, and that doesn't go to 11. That goes much, much higher, and it's got that final mission. You, in 5 years' time, you will remember that the final boss of the Simpsons game was playing DDR against God to rock you like a hurricane. And
well, look, this game...
I've got evidence of that, and that's that I remembered it. That's the whole basis of why I recommended this game in the first place. Because I rattled through so many games of like, I love this game. I love this game. And I, you know, it's been well established that I drilled through quite a few because you didn't want to play Oblivion. And actually, when we met up, I found out why you didn't want to play Oblivion, and it's some sort of like childhood trauma that's like, oh, my brother always played Oblivion and he would never let me play. And I thought,
no, it's nothing like that. It's just boring.
It's
just a boring game. I've played Skyrim, and I just didn't care for it. I just don't like that type of game. Look, this is the thing. You want me to do Oblivion. This is the Oblivion podcast. It's boring. Goodbye.
No, I want to do Oblivion because okay, and again, this is a slight pull back and reveal behind the curtain. I asked you if I could be on this podcast because we are friends and I like video games. Those were the two things. And I wasn't going to ask at first because I don't like imposing myself on people in that way. And then you said, I've done a podcast today about The Witcher 3. And my first thought was, if he's not played The Witcher 3, then what has he played? I assume not that much. So I
You
thought...
assumed wrong. No, there's
No, I
just
did
big blind spots for me with RPGs, in particular high fantasy RPGs.
That
I just
was
don't
it.
play them.
And then and at that point, I listened to every single episode, and I am genuinely a fan of this podcast, and it was... I know. I've been listening to, and I'll continue to listen to it. But one of the things that I nearly sent you a message saying I'll not be on it anymore, because I listened to the Red Strings Club episode with you and Mungo talking about like all these existential things, and I nearly sent you a message saying you're gonna be like setting out a children's table for me. Like here's my sort of impish comedian friend who I've done ridiculous things. Like I introduced you at a club by hiding behind a bush. Like I've done insane things like that. And
yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it was. It was a really good game.
But I miss live comedy.
But also the real, like, when I found out why you didn't want to play Oblivion, I can't express to you how much I wanted you to play it, just because I really did want you to have a breakdown. And I thought, I can't be on this podcast because of that.
I'm not in a position to have a breakdown right now, is unfortunately the problem you'll have. Maybe at some point in the future, we will revisit and I will play Oblivion.
Yeah.
But I'm not promising anything yet because I've got other things I need to do first.
You've got life to live, and I will admit that. But the thing is, when I knew that I'd recommended this game, because I recommended this game before I started, before I listened to the episode you did with Mungo, and I had been playing this game up until that point. And I listened to that episode, I think, the day before I was bringing you the disc. And I'd been playing through it, and I had gone from someone who had like this kind of nostalgia about the game, because I was like, it is better than it deserves to be. And I can't... If you said that this was the best video game you've never played, I know you're lying. But also, I think you took the disc from me and said, this won't be the best game I've never played. And I thought that's a level of pessimism that is both unfair and accurate.
Well, look, this is the thing I will give this game actual credit for.
Yeah.
So we'll do this bit now. Is it the best video game I've never played? No. Is it the worst video game I played for this podcast? Not even close. Cool. Like, this game is actually quite good. I think there's a lot here that would be nice. I don't think I can recommend it to the listener because it's actually really hard to get a copy of, which surprises me. Well, this is the thing, is that it's only on the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, the Wii, the PS2, the DS, and the PSP.
Oh yeah, only.
You can't... Well, no, but this thing, you can't buy this game like on a PS, on any of the Sony stores.
I see,
I don't even know if it's backwards compatible with the Xbox Series S and X and all of that lot.
I'm gonna go with possibly not, but I don't know.
Like, if you try and buy this game now used, it's about 30 quid.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's like surprisingly rare.
That's cool.
And so, look, I'm grateful that I got the chance to play it because it is a unique curio in which the final boss is DDR against God.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the best video game I played. But it was interesting. And I think it's more interesting than it deserves to be. And I would like, in terms of a different conclusion that perhaps someone listening to this is thinking of, I do think it's probably the best Simpsons video game. I think it's definitely better than Hit and Run.
That's such mid-level praise, and I appreciate it, because couching it in that definition has turned what sounds on paper to be a compliment into a compliment with such a big asterisk next to it that it's like, is it even a compliment anymore?
No. Well, this is the thing. This is just in the realm of where you judge this game. It does well within its realm. Outside of that realm, it falls down pretty quickly. It's something that what's even more tricky is if you're listening to this podcast. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast, you can borrow my copy. Well done on getting this far as well.
Yeah.
This is a long one. This is much longer than this game deserves.
My assumption is, when I saw the timer, and I've been seeing the timer for quite some time, my assumption is this is going to be cut down.
It probably will. It probably will.
It probably cut out all the times that I asked you about other games.
One of the things that's going to be cut out is this mention that I'm saying now, which is my dinner has arrived, so we need to wrap this up.
Mine's waiting for me downstairs. All I'll say
let's do this.
Yeah, what I will say is the reason for being so apprehensive to actually go through with this podcast is because I had started play, and this is why I think the final boss fight is absolute genius, is because it carried through to me enough that I was like, I remember this game being better than I thought it was, and I couldn't tell you any specific thing that happened in the hit and run, which I would have played a few years before. I couldn't beyond when you started saying the bees and the buzz color, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that now. But every now and then, just out of nowhere, I'll be like, the final boss fight of the Simpsons game was DDR against God to rock you like a hurricane. And that'll come back to you because of that. And that's the most genius thing, because it's such a remarkable snippet of a thing to say to someone of like, this happens. And
yeah, it's kind of like a thing that shouldn't exist, but does.
Yeah, and it's such a brilliant kind of like water cooler thing of like, here's something that happens in the game, and it does sound cool. And the rest of the game doesn't necessarily live up to it. It kind of does in some ways, it kind of doesn't in other ways. And obviously, like, the complaints you've leveled are problems. And then I thought, I'm lending Lewis my disc. I won't be able to play it beforehand to reacquaint myself. I will play it a little while beforehand. And you had to, like, push it back by a week or two or something. And so I said to myself, okay, I'm going to be off work for a little while. I'm going to 100% this game for the first time ever. And obviously I didn't quite make it. And that is why I nearly sent you a message saying I don't want to, because I can't really fully. The first thing you say is you're this game's champion, and I'm not this game's champion because I can't, like.
Look, as far as I know, you're the only person I know who owns this game.
And also,
so you're the only person who can defend it.
Well, one of the things as well, I gave you that game, and it still has the price sticker on it, and the price.
It does, and it does not deserve the price that is on the sticker.
But the price sticker is actually strangely prophetic based on what you said, because it's more than 30, but not much more.
Not much more. But look, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Chris.
I'm
really glad to play what's turned out to be quite a rare and interestingly unique video game, and I hope I didn't level too much anger at your door.
No, because I wanted you to be. I mean, I clearly wanted you to be angry, because my first choice was just I want Lewis to be angry at me for however long he can maintain that anger, and I'm very, very happy to have been allowed on, and I'm not sorry that I drove you to insanity at certain points.
Huge thanks to Chris there for coming onto the podcast. It was a great time. It was a lovely time to have a conversation about it. I think the Simpsons Game represents something that I really wanted in this podcast, which was to go over video games that I definitely had clocked, that I definitely realised was something that I wanted to play, and then actually getting a chance to play them and have a good conversation with someone about it. Because let's face it, if I'd played the Simpsons Game by myself, no way I would have finished it. No way I would have gotten to that final boss with God. No way I would have ever found anybody to talk to about this video game. If you've listened to this, I mean, look, I've saved you the chore of playing the Simpsons video game in some respects, because you won't be able to find it, and I don't think you should seek it out. But you do now know that the final boss of this game is one of the most insane things I've ever had to experience. So I think that's probably good content value. This marks the end of Season 1 in terms of games that I am playing on other people's recommendation. Coming up for the rest of this series will be games that I have assigned to people that I think they should enjoy as the best video game they've never played. So we're now in the section of the show. So if you listen to the episode with Kieran that happened earlier in this series, that was a little preview of what the second half of this series is going to be. I'm really looking forward to it. I've already recorded a few of them, and they've already been really interesting and fun, and it's interesting to be put on the back foot on a lot of these. I've gone in with big expectations of blowing people away, and that's not always been the case. So I think you'll have a great time listening to those episodes. And I'm really looking forward to capping off the series. I've technically recorded what I think probably will be the series finale, and to my eyes, it's a real jaw-dropper. I think it's going to be a really fun thing to end on, but we've still got loads of episodes to go before then, and then after that we're going to take a short break as a series, and then I'll be back with a brand new batch of guests, completely new guests. I know how you feel about new guests. Largely, if you're listening to this and you haven't been on the podcast as a guest, that's probably something to look forward to. So we'll see how that goes. Thanks again for listening. If you could put 5 stars on a tune, that would be nice. If you could go on Spotify. I don't even know if there is a way to tell Spotify you like something. I don't think Spotify cares what you think. I think if you send an email to Spotify, they just send back a picture of a man shrugging. So that's probably what happens there. But anywhere else that does care about your opinion, I care about your opinion, saying it's nice. So please do that. We're also on Twitter. There's also a Facebook. I'll be honest, if you're on Twitter or Facebook, you're largely just getting updates of when the episode's released. So if you're subscribed to the podcast, that's what I care about. I care that you're subscribed to the podcast. I don't care about the Twitter that much. I mean, look, let's be honest. We're all waiting for the day that we can just delete Twitter and not care any. But don't tell Twitter that. If you tell Twitter that, they'll cancel you. No, they won't. They might. Don't tell Twitter that we all hate it. We're not allowed yet. But that will happen. Thanks for listening. Stay safe.